NFL scout, I dominated. So Joel Klatt comes in, sits on the couch, and we go through half the first round. We'll do a mock draft, which I'm very prone to do at home all the time. Very excited about this. The Klatster's rolling in, has the courage to be beaten badly on television. So I do respect that. Joy Taylor is joining me. How are you, Joy?
I'm great. Feels like spring is almost here.
I know. It really does.
April's just around the corner.
I went for a walk yesterday. It was beautiful outside. Unbelievable.
Very nice.
Very nice. So Charles Barkley, who I'm a big fan of. Listen, James Harden is doing a great job in Brooklyn. But we see this all the time. We've talked about this with Lamar Jackson. Right now, he's a great regular season quarterback. Is he a great postseason quarterback? We've seen this. A-Rod was a great player, but he was never quite as good in the postseason. That's James Harden. He's a dominant regular season player. He's not as dominant in the postseason. And my belief has always been because he doesn't get the whistle in the playoffs. Referees get out of the way. And the further the playoffs go, the conference finals, the finals, I mean, it's wrestling. Refs do not want to decide it. They want the stars to decide it. The refs don't have a favorite. Their favorite's swallowing the whistle. And you just don't get the whistle. And Harden's game is built for the whistle. So was Karl Malone's. But let's listen to Charles Barkley, who made quite a statement on James Harden a couple of days ago.
He is the most awesome offensive player I've ever seen. Listen, Michael and Kobe were better players from the guard standpoint. But as far as offensively, they couldn't shoot threes like him. They were not as great as dribbling the basketball, going to the basket, getting fouled. I mean, this guy, every time he goes to the basket, he's going to hit somebody and get 2 free throws.
Except in the playoffs. If you look at James Harden's regular season numbers and his postseason numbers, his field goal percentage goes down, his free throw attempts go down, his three-point percentage goes down, his points go down. They don't plummet, but they're not the same. Whereas Michael Jordan and Kobe were often at their greatest in the playoffs. We keep falling for 3 or 4 things in sports. One of the things we always fall for is the quarterbacks in the draft from big-name schools. They don't dominate the league. Go look at the last year's 8 division winners. Not a single one was from a football power. Look at Tua. Because from big-name schools, being a quarterback is all about comfort. Receivers are wide open. You never get hit. NFL quarterback is all about discomfort. Can you just get hit constantly? We keep falling for that. The star quarterback from the big university, the Alabama quarterback, look around the league. That's not who dominates the league. It's guys from Boston College and NC State and Miami of Ohio and Cal. That's one of the things we fall for. The second thing we always fall for is the flashy point guard in the NBA that can't shoot. Derrick Rose, John Wall, Russell Westbrook. If you can't shoot and you're under 6'5" in this league, you will never dominate it. You will never be a huge factor in the playoffs. You got to be able to shoot. Now, if you're LeBron and can drive, or you're 6'9", you're a dominant wing or a big, that becomes less important. But if you're 6'4" or under and can't shoot, you become actually a playoff liability. The third thing in sports we always fall for is the 12-year, $400 million baseball contract. None have ever looked good halfway through it. The Mookie Betts deal is the first one that has a chance to not be awful because he's great, he's healthy, he signed it young enough so by the end of it, he'll be out of his prime, but he won't be an old man. And that has a chance to be a good one. And even the last 3 years of that, and Mookie's the best player in the game or second best, you're way overpaying for him. James Harden's regular season dominance is falling into this category. If I have to hear another person tell me how great he is in the regular season, he's Karl Malone. And I covered Karl Malone. Karl Malone scored the second most points in league history. That's insane, right? In the history of the planet. Karl Malone scored the second most points. More than Michael, more than LeBron, more than Kobe, more than Hakeem, more than Shaq, more than everybody except Kareem. No rings, 2 final trips. Well, Karl Malone depended on the whistle. Look at the top 5 scorers of all time. Kareem's got 6 titles. LeBron's got 4. Kobe's got 5 and MJ 6. Karl, 0. Why? Don't tell me he didn't have help. John Stockton's a top 5 point guard ever. Jerry Sloan was a top 2 or 3 coach in the league. Mark Eaton led the NBA during that time with Karl Malone, blocking shots 4 times, 5 times first or second team all defense. So he had first or second best rim protector, first or second best point guard, top 3 coach, and they always had, and by the way, one of the great home court advantages, they got no rings, got 2 trips. Wasn't like the West had dominant teams every year because Karl Malone depended on the whistle. I covered some of those series, Utah, Portland. It's not that he didn't ever get the whistle, but you don't get it in those big deciding games. James Harden, similarly, has 23 times in his career scored over 50 points. Never in the playoffs. Because to score 50 points, you got to get to the free throw line a lot, and you do not in the playoffs. That is the difference. Kobe didn't depend on the whistle. Larry Bird didn't depend on the whistle. Michael Jordan didn't depend on the whistle. Magic didn't depend on the whistle. They would get the whistle, but they didn't need it to definitively cement their game, and Harden does. It's not to say this team can't get to the finals, but that ball-centric style, how many years are we going to see it? It rolls in the regular season. It dries up in the postseason. As many of you know, it's unfortunate. It's very hurtful, but Cleveland doesn't like me. I have been more right on the Cleveland Browns than any team in the last 3 years, Joy, as my witness. I told you John Dorsey would not work as a GM. Right. I told you Freddie Kitchens' disaster. Right. I told you Kevin Stefanski finally was a grown-up. It would work. And I told you Baker Mayfield's talented, but he's not number 1 pick talented. And the Browns, the numbers tell you, are better when he throws less. This is interesting. Jadeveon Clowney is close to signing with Cleveland. Now, Jadeveon Clowney is one of those guys that he's never quite lived up to the hype, but now he's undervalued. Okay, he can play. He's a good player. Now, he's not worth big money. He's not as good as his hype. But the idea that Jadeveon Clowney isn't good is ridiculous. Last time he was playing for Seattle, there was a playoff game. He made plays all over the field. Jadeveon Clowney's a good football player. He got so hyped out of college that we expect him to be Mike Tyson and knock everybody out. And that's just not what he is. He's inconsistent. But he's a really good football player. And my takeaway, if Clowney signs with Cleveland, they are now the 3rd most talented team in the NFL. Tampa 1, best roster, Kansas City 2, and Cleveland 3. Well, Tampa just won a Super Bowl, and Kansas City won it 2 years ago. No more excuses for Baker Mayfield. Competent head coach, competent GM, best offensive line, great weapons, and they have done a great job to solve the back end of their defense this offseason. They really have. John Johnson, tremendous safety. So this morning, if Clowney signs with Cleveland, there are 4 overwhelming favorites in the AFC. Kansas City, Buffalo, Indy, and Cleveland. Baltimore's close, but not in that group. It is go time. It is go time for Baker Mayfield. This is a stacked roster if they get Clowney. You'd have Clowney, you got Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, just as pass rushers. Folks, this is a big deal. Don't buy into this Clowney's overrated. Clowney can play. Not worth big money, and Cleveland's not going to give him big money, but Clowney can play. Clowney's a playmaker. And when you have a team as good as Cleveland that got to the playoffs last year, you're looking for playmakers. You're not going to get Trent Williams left tackle on the market. You're not going to get that. But guys that can make plays in big spots, absolutely. I'd take Jadeveon Clowney tomorrow for that. I just don't want to build my franchise around him. So, and Colin, I see stories this morning. Would Cleveland be the favorites in the AFC North? Of course they would. I called it a week ago. Of course they would. Cleveland is and should be favored to win the AFC North if they land Clowney. I'm not saying, listen, I said this last week before they had Clowney, but this is a real pickup. He's a real football player. Don't listen to anybody. Dude can play and make plays. All right. I just heard a terrible trade idea in the NBA, and I don't get it at all. A terrible Laker trade idea. You know that phrase, given 110%? Come on now, how can somebody give more than 100%? Well, seriously, what would it even look like? Well, for Mercedes-AMG, that's what it looks like in automobiles. For the last 50 years plus, the motorsport magicians at AMG have been making the impossible possible. From compact